Imagine waking up to find the rules for life-saving vaccines have changed overnight. No advisory board warnings, no open debate, just a stroke of a pen from the top. Parents, doctors, and even the nation's leading scientists are left asking, what just happened? The United States, a country boasting some of the strongest public health institutions in the world, is now at the center of global controversy. A new health secretary rolling back vaccine guidance against the advice of experts, as pharmaceutical giants and politicians battle over the future of medicine and the meaning of public trust. How did we get here, and what does this mean for the health and money of millions of Americans? To answer that, we have to hit rewind. The story starts with powerful forces in motion, groundbreaking drugs hitting the market, waves of skepticism fueled by politics, and an ongoing pandemic constantly rewriting the rules of the game. Let's take a deep dive into the biotech business and the crossroads of American health policy, where every decision resonates far beyond hospital walls. First, on the science front, a pharmaceutical milestone. Sparrow Therapeutics and British pharma giant GSK have just announced that their jointly developed oral antibiotic, tebipenem HBr, achieved a statistically equivalent cure rate to a popular injectable antibiotic in a Phase 3 clinical trial for complicated urinary tract infections, CUTs. This is a massive deal, and here's why. Urinary tract infections might sound mundane, but for millions, especially older adults and those with weakened immune systems, they can quickly become life-threatening when bacteria resist traditional medicines. Antibiotic resistance is, in WHO's words, one of humanity's top 10 global health threats. For decades, serious infections increasingly required hospital stays and IV drugs, costing billions yearly and taking a toll on lives and productivity. What if you could take a pill at home and beat an infection that used to mean a trip to the ER? That's the promise tebipenem HBr holds. It's the latest in a rare class of oral carbapenem antibiotics, a group typically reserved for the most severe hospital-treated infections, until now. Japan approved a similar drug for children back in 2009. In the US, the FDA has fast-tracked tebipenem HBr's review, designating it a qualified infectious disease product. And the stakes are high, both medically and financially. The global oral antibiotics market is expected to soar to nearly $29 billion by 2032. GSK and Sparrow hope to win FDA approval by the end of 2025, potentially changing the standard of care for millions. But there's a shadow. Sparrow's financial instability raises the risk of delays or even a failure to bring this breakthrough to patients. If their drug succeeds, it could rewrite the rules for treating drug-resistant infections and put Sparrow on the biotech map. If they stumble, it might set back new antibiotic development for years. But while innovation races ahead in the lab, political crosscurrents threaten to reshape who gets what and who pays. Usually, guidance on vaccines comes from the CDC through an open and meticulous process involving its advisory committee of immunization experts. These recommendations influence all sorts of decisions, from what insurers must cover to what local pharmacies keep in stock. That process was just bulldozed. Enter Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the new HHS secretary, and a figure known as much for his vaccine skepticism as his famous surname. In a move that stunned even seasoned policy watchers, Kennedy rolled back the CDC's recommendation that healthy children and pregnant women get COVID-19 booster shots. No public advisory meeting, no consultation with the CDC's scientists. Instead, a unilateral directive, described by one law professor as extraordinary, that breaks with decades of precedent. This represents a bulldozing of safeguards intended to keep public health officials honest and their decisions transparent, wrote Matthew Herper, a prominent industry columnist. The response from the scientific and public health community was swift and sharp. Dr. William Schaffner at Vanderbilt called it turning the CDC's process upside down. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists warned that COVID-19 in pregnancy is still catastrophic, and that the underlying science hasn't changed. Arthur Kaplan, a bioethics heavyweight at NYU, declared, "The decision makes little sense ethically or medically. Vaccination is key to preventing serious illness and transmission." Yet on Wall Street, vaccine makers seemed unfazed. The stock prices of Pfizer, Moderna, and Novavax even rose. Why? Because the hard truth is that most COVID vaccine sales have, for some time, come from adults 65 and over, the very group still covered under the FDA's new, narrower guidance. For healthy children and expecting mothers, access and coverage could soon be a much steeper climb. Removing recommendations may limit pharmacists' ability to administer COVID vaccines to children and pregnant women, cautioned Richard Dang from USC. Dr. Naima Joseph at Boston University added, COVID vaccination during pregnancy is cost-effective, protecting both mothers and babies from severe outcomes. Dr. Cody Meisner from Dartmouth, meanwhile, argued that the U.S. has overemphasized COVID vaccines for young children and pregnant women, spotlighting the ongoing debate, even among experts, over risk versus reward. Under the surface, bigger shifts are underway. The U.S. is one of only 2 countries in the world, alongside New Zealand, that allows direct-to-consumer advertising of prescription drugs. In 2024, the industry spent more than $6 billion targeting American households. At the same time, skepticism about public health authorities is on the rise, partly stoked by years of polarized debate about COVID, vaccines, and government mandates. Now, with Kennedy at the helm and COVID contrarians filling key HHS posts, critics fear a new era where science could take a back seat to political calculation. George Benjamin, executive director of the American Public Health Association, didn't mince words. Skipping the advisory committee raises serious questions about equitable vaccine access. Dr. Paul Offit at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, speaking from the front lines, put it more bluntly. We still have children in our emergency department with COVID. Do they consider that not worthy of prevention? The implications stretch far beyond policy wonk debates in Washington. In the U.S., immunization guidance from the CDC is the bedrock of what vaccines insurance plans are required to cover for free. Without that seal of approval, families could face bills of $57.50 per COVID shot for children or nearly $140 for adults, an insurmountable barrier for millions already struggling with the cost of care. Dr. Rich Besser of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation warned, this will impact insurance coverage and access to free vaccines for children, exacerbating disparities. Meanwhile, the viruses themselves aren't waiting for policy to catch up. As of May 2025, a new Omicron offshoot, LP8.1, made up 70% of U.S. COVID cases. The World Health Organization is tracking yet another variant spreading across several states, NB1.8.1. The pandemic is far from over, and the next chapter is being written in real time. But the process for updating vaccine guidelines, once slow and open to public input, has now been replaced by executive fiat. Legal experts say this makes the new guidance vulnerable to reversal in the courts. Market analysts highlight another danger. If the FDA deems the next versions of Pfizer or Moderna vaccines as new products requiring fresh trials, it's possible that no doses will be available this fall, not even for the elderly or immunocompromised. That's a terrifying prospect if another variant surge hits. Behind the scenes, a leadership vacuum compounds the chaos. The CDC still lacks a permanent director, leaving the agency without a steady hand as these policy earthquakes hit. Dr. Celine Gounder, CBS News medical contributor, warns that CDC firings and political interference under Trump could hinder progress on public health issues for years to come. But some experts, like Dr. Vinay Prasad at the FDA, support the new approach, not encouraging young, healthy children to get the COVID shot unless clear benefit emerges from rigorous trials. For them, the new policy corrects what they perceive as medical overreach. So, we're left with a jarring split screen. On one, scientific innovation races ahead, promising new cures like tebipenem for intractable infections. On the other, political theater and public mistrust threaten to undermine the very system designed to deliver these breakthroughs safely and fairly. This is more than a debate about shots in arms. It's a battle over the future of public health, the role of government, and the intersection of business and medicine. In this volatile mix, legal battles and public protest are looming. Vaccine makers are rethinking their strategy, insurers weigh coverage options, and patients, especially the most vulnerable, wonder if they'll be left behind. As autumn approaches, with new COVID variants already spreading and the world watching America's next move, one question hangs in the air. Could procedural chaos and policy whiplash leave millions without access to updated vaccines, just as the next wave hits? The answer, and the high-stakes maneuvering behind the scenes, may determine not just the fate of America's pandemic response, but the shape of global health for years to come. Imagine standing on a threshold where decades of scientific advancement, the rigor of regulatory bodies, and our collective trust in medicine are all suddenly thrown into uncertainty. This is the landscape now unfolding in the United States, as we witness a seismic shift in public health policy. one where the implications reach far beyond the immediate headlines about COVID-19 boosters or a new antibiotic on the horizon. So, what does the future hold if these trends accelerate? Let's look ahead, through the lens of both risk and opportunity. On one hand, the rollback of CDC recommendations for COVID-19 boosters in children and pregnant women may appear as an administrative change, a matter for policymakers and insurance companies. But for millions of families, it could mark the beginning of a new era, one where vaccine access, long taken for granted, becomes fragmented and uncertain. Experts warn that insurance companies rely on CDC guidance to determine what vaccines are covered. With the removal of recommendations, private plans may no longer reimburse COVID-19 shots for kids and expectant mothers. The sticker shock could be substantial. In today's market, a pediatric COVID vaccine dose starts at $57.50, with adult doses costing more than $130. That's a significant barrier, especially for low-income families, and a stark contrast to the universal, free access many grew accustomed to earlier in the pandemic. And as Dr. Rich Besser of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation put it, this will impact insurance coverage and access to free vaccines for children, exacerbating disparities. When public health systems become fragmented, the people most at risk, the underserved, the marginalized, are often left further behind. Meanwhile, the very process by which these decisions are made appears to be unraveling. The CDC's long-standing tradition of gathering the nation's best public health minds for open, transparent debate has been set aside. As William Schaffner of Vanderbilt University noted with concern, the CDC's established process has been turned upside down. That procedural breach isn't just bureaucratic, it's profound. Trust is built not only on outcomes, but on how those outcomes are reached. If the public perceives that decisions are rushed, politically motivated, or not rooted in robust evidence, skepticism and even resistance follow. And in the context of vaccines, that hesitancy can translate into lost lives. As if to underscore the magnitude of the moment, other cracks are appearing in the edifice of American health policy. The FDA is signaling it will only approve or recommend COVID-19 vaccines for those aged 65 and older, or for people with certain health conditions. Manufacturers like Pfizer and Moderna may be required to conduct extensive new trials before their updated shots are approved for younger populations, even as new viral variants like LP8.1 and NB.1.8.1 spread rapidly. This means if the FDA deems these latest shots as fundamentally different from prior versions, none may be available for the fall, no matter how fierce the next wave might be. And amid all this, the U.S. still lacks a permanent CDC director. The leadership vacuum further complicates swift, coordinated responses to emerging threats. Overlay all this with growing vaccine hesitancy, fueled by conflicting messaging and political polarization. According to Dr. Naima Joseph of Boston University, the underlying science hasn't changed. COVID infection during pregnancy remains dangerous, and vaccines still offer critical protection. Yet when official guidance changes abruptly, even experts are left perplexed. Mark Turrentine of Baylor College of Medicine voiced his frustration. COVID poses significant risks to pregnant individuals. This decision is perplexing. But it's not just vaccines. The fate of Sparrow Therapeutics' oral antibiotic, tebipenem HBr, shows another side of the coin. After decades without new oral antibiotics for complicated urinary tract infections, tebipenem HBr could be a game changer, statistically equivalent in efficacy to the current standard, but far easier to use at home. The global oral antibiotics market is slated to reach $28.8 billion by 2032, and GSK is moving for FDA approval by late 2025. But here, the threat is different. Will the company survive long enough to bring its drug to market, or will financial and regulatory hurdles stifle innovation? The Qualified Infectious Disease Product and Fast Track designations from the FDA are meant to expedite review. But even that might not be enough if market forces or shifting regulatory priorities prevail. This back and forth between progress and politics, between innovation and regulation, mirrors the broader tug-of-war at the heart of American health policy. If the system bends too far in either direction, toward unchecked skepticism or bureaucratic inertia, it risks failing the very people it's designed to protect. So, what practical lessons can we, as individuals, take from this moment? How can you, the viewer, navigate a landscape where certainty is in short supply and guidance seems to change by the week? First, stay informed, but choose your sources wisely. Seek out data-driven, scientifically grounded perspectives. When public health recommendations shift, investigate the rationale. Was this change backed by new evidence or pushed through over objections from experts? Listen for expert consensus, not just the loudest voices. As Dr. Arthur Kaplan of NYU reminds us, vaccination is key to preventing serious illness and transmission. When someone claims otherwise, ask what evidence they're relying on and whether it stands up to scrutiny. Second, advocate for transparency in public decision-making. Let your representatives know that open debate, advisory committees, and public input aren't bureaucratic red tape, they're pillars of trust. Without them, critical decisions risk being made in echo chambers, untested by real-world perspectives. Third, recognize the role you play in your community's resilience. Vaccines are as much about collective protection as individual risk. If access becomes limited, look for local programs, clinics, or public health initiatives that may offer support. Ask your healthcare provider what options remain, especially if you or a loved one fall into a high-risk group. And on the innovation front, stay tuned to developments like tebipenem HBr. The rise of antibiotic resistance is quiet but relentless. When new treatments emerge, they can be lifelines, if they survive the gauntlet of financial pressures and regulatory delays. The deeper lesson is that public health is, at its core, a social contract, a promise that we will look after one another, guided by evidence, expertise, and transparency. When that contract is threatened, the consequences ripple outward, affecting every household. Will millions lose access to vaccines as new viral threats emerge? The answer isn't set in stone. If policymakers restore transparent, science-based processes, and if the public demands accountability, the system can course correct. Legal challenges to the HHS decisions are already underway, and the ultimate outcome may hinge on the court's willingness to enforce procedural norms. In the meantime, the risk is real. Lower vaccine uptake, especially among children and pregnant women, could invite resurgences, not just of COVID-19 but other preventable diseases. We saw it with measles in recent years, and history warns us, complacency is costly. Yet, there's an opportunity here as well. This crossroads can ignite a renewed focus on scientific literacy and civic engagement. The more people understand the mechanics of public health policy, the incentives, the safeguards, the checks and balances, the more resilient our society becomes against misinformation, political whims, or market shocks. And here's a secret fact. The oral form of tebipenem, the very same class of antibiotics now awaiting U.S. review, has been approved in Japan for pediatric use since 2009. For over a decade, children in Japan have had access to an oral carbapenem, sparing them hospital stays and IV lines. The lesson? Breakthroughs often exist, but whether we benefit depends on more than just science. It's about policy, perseverance, and public demand. So as we leave you with this, remember, the current turbulence in American public health policy isn't just a story about COVID-19 or antibiotics or politics. It's about the values we choose to uphold: transparency, trust, and a shared commitment to the greater good. If you want to see a future where innovation flourishes and public health delivers for all, stay informed, speak up, ask questions, insist leaders respect science and the processes that keep us safe, and most importantly, don't check out. Because the decisions made now will shape the world you, your children, and your community inherit. If you found this analysis valuable, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What changes would you like to see in public health policy? And if you want more deep dives into the science and policy,